At first, these places do not seem to belong together at all. Okinawa looks different from Sardinia. Nicoya looks different from Nicoya. The ingredients are different. The flavors are different. The food culture is different. But when you look at their lunches side by side, you start noticing the same thing again and again. Not the exact foods, the way the meal is built. That is what I want to look at with you today. We are going to walk through 3 lunch bowls inspired by these blue zones, not as recipes you need to follow exactly, but as a way to see the pattern they share. Because once you see that pattern, lunch gets easier. One day a bowl might lean more Okinawa, another day, more Nicoya. The ingredients can change. The meal still makes sense. Most people do not struggle with lunch because they need more nutrition advice. They struggle because, on an ordinary weekday, lunch asks for too many decisions. What to make, whether it is balanced enough, whether it fits the version of healthy eating they are trying to follow that week. One thing these Blue Zone communities seem to have in common is that lunch often follows a pattern simple enough to repeat without much thought. Not because the food is bland or limited, because the structure holds. That is what we are borrowing here. 3 bowls, each inspired by a different place. They look different, they taste different, but they are built in a similar way. And as we go through them, I want you to pay less attention to the exact ingredients and more attention to how each bowl comes together. That is the part you can actually use. Start with Okinawa. Sweet potato at the base. Some pickled vegetables or greens on the side. Maybe a little tofu. Maybe broth. In some versions, a small amount of fish or pork used more as part of the bowl than the center of it. Nothing about it feels complicated. The bowl is warm and soft. Sweet potato carries most of the weight of the meal, and the broth, tofu, or small savory additions keep it from feeling flat. It is the kind of lunch that feels simple while you are eating it, but satisfying enough that you do not find yourself searching the kitchen again an hour later. And it is easy to imagine eating something like this often without needing to change much. Move to Nicoya. Black beans and rice, but not a big heavy plate. More like a smaller bowl with roasted squash or plantain, some cabbage, a squeeze of lime. Sometimes maybe a little cheese, sometimes an egg depending on the kitchen. The whole thing takes about as long to put together as it does to describe. This kind of bowl often feels a little brighter. Rice and beans give it weight, but the vegetables and lime keep it from feeling dense. The flavors are simple, but there is enough contrast that the meal still feels lively. It feels familiar, but still like a real lunch. Then Sardinia. White beans, greens cooked down in olive oil, a little farro or a piece of flatbread, maybe tomatoes, maybe fennel. In some versions, a bit of sheep's cheese. Different ingredients, different flavor, but the same feeling of a meal that knows what it is doing. There is something a little rustic about this version. Beans and greens have been eaten together for generations in places like this, often with a little bread or grain alongside. It is the kind of meal that makes sense to repeat. Now, look at these with me for a second. Not just at what is in them, but at how they come together. Something keeps repeating. We will put words to it in a minute. First, just notice it. Here's what keeps showing up. In all 3 bowls, most of the meal still comes from plant foods. Sometimes that looks like greens. Sometimes it looks more like sweet potato or squash. But the point is the same. The bowl is built around plant foods first. That does not mean every meal is vegetarian or that these places all eat the same way. It just means the plant foods tend to carry most of the bowl. Then there is something that grounds it. Rice, farro, sweet potato, a piece of flatbread, something that makes lunch feel like lunch and not just a snack with ambitions. Then there is something that helps it last. Sometimes beans, sometimes tofu, sometimes a little cheese, fish, broth, or meat used as part of the bowl rather than the whole point of it, enough to carry the meal a little further. And then, usually, something small that pulls it together. Lime, miso, olive oil, a little acid, a little salt, a little depth, nothing that turns lunch into a project. That is the pattern. A bowl built mostly from plant foods. with something to ground it, something to help it hold, and a simple finish. Once you see that, the ingredients stop feeling so fixed. You can change the rice, you can change the beans, you can change the vegetables. The meal still makes sense. What changes from place to place is mostly the surface. The flavor shifts, the ingredients shift, the feeling of the bowl shifts. An Okinawan bowl tends to be softer, sweet potato, broth, tofu, something pickled or fermented on the side. Warm textures. A bowl leaning toward Nicoya might feel brighter. Rice and beans, something fresh, maybe a squeeze of lime. The contrast is a little sharper. A Sardinian-style bowl often feels more rustic. Beans, greens, maybe bread or grains. Olive oil tying it together. Sometimes a little cheese. Those differences matter. They are part of what makes each place distinct. That is why the meal can flex without falling apart. You are not holding on to a single list of ingredients. You are holding on to the shape of the meal. And once you see that shape, it becomes much easier to work with whatever is already in your kitchen. So, what does that actually look like on a Tuesday? Maybe you have sweet potato left from the night before. No edamame, but there are white beans. No miso, but there is lemon and olive oil. The bowl shifts a little, but it still works. You are still building the same kind of lunch. Or maybe you already have rice cooked, some canned black beans, a bit of cabbage, whatever greens are around, a squeeze of lime, maybe a little cheese if that is what is in the fridge. That starts to feel closer to Nicoya, even if it did not begin there. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They think tofu and beans are too different to trade. Or that cabbage changes the meal completely if the original bowl had greens. Or that once a bowl includes a little cheese, fish, or meat, it stops fitting the pattern. But in practice, those ingredients are often playing similar roles in the meal. What matters most is still the overall balance. That is what makes this useful. You are working with what is already in the kitchen and building something that still holds together. In a real kitchen, this usually starts with one simple question. What is already here? Maybe it is leftover roasted broccoli, half a bag of spinach, some squash from 2 nights ago. That is where the bowl begins. Then you add something that gives it a little weight, rice if it is already cooked, a sweet potato, a piece of bread, whatever makes lunch feel like a real meal. Then something that helps it last, canned beans, frozen edamame, tofu if you keep it around, maybe a little cheese, maybe some leftover fish or chicken from the night before. Nothing fancy, just something that gives the bowl a little more staying power. Then you finish it. Olive oil and lemon, a spoon of miso stirred into warm water, tahini loosened with a little water. Enough to bring it together, and that is where this starts to feel easier. You are no longer standing in front of the fridge trying to invent lunch from scratch. You are looking at what is there and building from a shape you already know. Once that shape gets familiar, the bowl often starts with whatever is left over. Some days it is built almost entirely from leftovers, a vegetable that was meant for dinner, rice that was cooked the night before, half a can of beans that needs to be used. Other days the fridge is nearly empty and you start with just one thing, maybe a sweet potato in the oven, or rice in a small pot while you do something else. Either way, the decision becomes smaller. You are no longer asking yourself a big question like, what should lunch be today? You are asking something much easier. What do I already have that could fill each part of the bowl? Once you start thinking that way, lunch stops being something you have to invent every day. It becomes something you assemble. There is something relieving about seeing that people in these places seem to have eaten from a more familiar rhythm, with meals built from foods they used often. Once you start seeing that shape, it gets easier to use it in your own kitchen. Lunch feels simpler. The decision gets smaller. You have a rough idea of what you are building before you even open the fridge. And over time, that matters more than people think. If this kind of work helps you, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link here. Entirely optional. It helps me keep making videos like this, and if you want to stay in this same lane a little longer, There are a couple of videos here on simple blue zone meal patterns and easy longevity eating ideas that build on this one.